The COVID-19 outbreak has disrupted many operations throughout the world, and South Africa is absolutely no exception. The positive news is that while most organizations are buckling under the pressure posed by the coronavirus, Eskom has kept the lights on as demand for electricity has dropped over this period. However, Eskom's financial debt continues to pose a huge threat. The power utility is also in a standoff with energy regulator NERSA over the cash injection Eskom received from Treasury last year and disagreements over tariff increases. So to discuss this further, we're joined via Skype by Andre De Ruyter, who's Eskom's Chief Executive Officer. Great to have you on Morning Live. Thanks so much for joining us.
Morning.
So, we talk about coronavirus and the effects that it's had on many industries and businesses around the world. However, can we say that in a very odd way, coronavirus has almost been a bit of a gift to Eskom to try and sort out issues during this down period?
Yeah, and well, no one welcome pandemic. Clear that the lockdown has created an opportunity for us where demand is significantly lower by some 7,500 megawatts, which is very significant. And that has enabled us to double our normal short-term maintenance program. So we are using the opportunity to expand and extend our attempts to make Eskom a more reliable supplier.
Yeah. So let's get a little bit more detail in terms of operations in general. How has Eskom and its operations been affected by coronavirus?
So the first decision that we've taken has been to ensure that our employees and our contractors are as safe as possible. So we've asked almost 20,000 of our employees to work from home. There's a number of about 15,000 that are ready to be dispatched from home should they be required to look after line faults, transmission failures and so forth. And then there's 10,554 of our employees who are working on site as we speak. Now, we've put in place a number of very stringent measures, measures to ensure that they are adequately protected. We regularly spray down all of our facilities. We've issued them with hand sanitizers to ensure that they are safe. We've restricted the density of people. So we've taken every possible measure to prevent any infection, and thus far we've been very successful. The only 3 infections that we've had have all related to transmission from outside of Eskom and all occurred prior to the lockdown. So thus far our efforts have been very successful.
All right, so that's good news to hear from Eskom's side. You've also said that Eskom was doing extensive contingency planning to ensure enough of a buffer period prior to the end of lockdown. So let us into what exactly is happening and what this means to the consumer.
So as we have had to put some of our units into cold storage in order to cater for the significantly lower demand, first of all, as I've said, we've been doing maintenance. But then secondly, we will have to ramp up those units back to full load in time for a return of consumption once lockdown ends. And this is what we are planning towards. We have a number of our engineers and our maintenance people working flat out behind the scenes in order to enable us to, with a significant buffer period, about 5 days or so before the end of lockdown, to ensure that we will be able to restart and cope with an increase in demand.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this time, as you say, there's much needed maintenance that's happening at Eskom. How are you able to do this considering staff? I mean, you say that staff are working as normal, or they're considered essential. So there are no staff that are off at this time. You've got a full staff contingency. Is that true?
That is correct. Apart from as I've mentioned earlier, we have had to postpone our so-called philosophy maintenance, and those are the major turnaround programs that we've got in place at our various power stations. And the reason for that is that we, from a medical safety perspective, cannot at this point in time accommodate a large concentration of employees and contractors on our sites. So we have had to postpone those major activities and also construction activities at Kusile. But from a short-term maintenance point of view, we are carrying on and have taken double the amount of maintenance during this lockdown period.
Yeah. I mean, you've made a statement saying that you expect Eskom to come out of this period as a much more reliable and stronger entity. Load shedding, could we be so bold as to say perhaps a thing of the past, or is that being way too optimistic on my side?
I think one should be quite careful to make any guarantees when it comes to the reliability of the Eskom power system where we are right now. As I indicated in January, there is an increased risk of load shedding as we take down the major units for extensive repairs based on the original equipment manufacturer's prescripts. And we anticipate that that increased risk will be sustained until winter of 2021. So for the time being, while we do our best to keep the lights on, we won't do so at all costs. We have to restore the integrity of our assets, and after lockdown has been completed, we will continue with that maintenance program.
Now, there have been negotiations with municipalities, and it seems as if Eskom is ready to act on those with huge outstanding debts. Soweto being a very big issue here. How is the Soweto situation that's been long-standing with regard to debt being dealt with?
So we have intervened again in the Soweto situation, and we are ensuring that those people who do pay for electricity have the maximum availability, and that those people who don't pay for electricity, unfortunately, we have to cut off. Now, it's been quite difficult for our crews to go into individual neighborhoods and cut down the supply to individual households because of security issues. And we have therefore had to resort to a practice where if the payment rate is less than 30%, we cut back the electricity at a substation level. And that is a practice that we have implemented. Unfortunately, this has a negative impact on some of our customers, but for those who choose not to pay, unfortunately, those are the consequences that they have to face. We have therefore seen a doubling in payment rates from Soweto over the past number of months, partly attributable, no doubt, to the appeals from senior politicians, including the president, for the residents of Soweto to pay. So we have made some progress, but we're a long way off from resolving the issue in its entirety.
Yeah, I mean, there are also some court cases that are happening between Eskom and NERSA. Where are those at the moment?
So we've had one verdict which has been in our favor, and that related to the regulatory asset base calculation, where the court found in Eskom's favor. So we're very gratified by that, and we regard it as a vindication of our view that we've held. There is another court case which will be heard shortly, presumably after lockdown is complete, regarding the classification of an equity injection by government to the tune of 23 billion rand as revenue. And we disagree with NERSA on that count, and because we have not been able to reach an amicable resolution of that, we have had to go to court. Now, this is not a place where we want to be. A utility generally does not want to take its regulator to court, so we are looking for a more constructive way of resolving these issues. But until such time as we have reached that space between us, we will have to resort to the courts to make our differences go away.
I imagine that this is going to be even more difficult for you because, you know, we're looking at a lockdown. Many businesses, we have no idea how they're going to survive during this, and people are not earning an income. Businesses have shut down. The projections for growth in South Africa have even been lowered. So, you know, in terms of demanding more from the consumer and going to the courts for that, I imagine this is going to be a very difficult case for you to get through at this point.
I think that the case as far as the equity injection is concerned is quite clear in our minds. And in fact, the judge in the case has already pronounced his view on this, saying that he agrees on the fundamentals of the issue with Eskom. When it comes to the increases in tariffs, it's important to bear in mind that the tariffs that Eskom are applying for are those tariffs that have been agreed to by Cabinet and are also reflected in the integrated resource plan. So we're not asking for excessive tariff increases that seek to subsidize our own inefficiency. I'm merely asking for cost-reflective tariffs that are appropriate to enable us to keep on being a reliable supplier of electricity going forward. And for us to do that, we need to be able to generate the necessary revenue that we can apply the funds to carry out the required maintenance. So that's the situation that we find ourselves in. We are not seeking any assistance from the electricity consumer to bail out our own inefficiencies. On the contrary, we are seeking tariffs that are globally benchmarked, and at this point in time, South Africa's electricity tariffs are still among the lowest in the world, even on a purchasing power adjusted basis. But
the 3-year 69 million rand cash injection by Treasury, which Eskom says is more of a bailout, but NERSA considers this as a tariff subsidy. Your response to this?
Well, we think that there's a fundamental accounting difference of opinion here. Normally, when a shareholder, in this case the government, makes an equity injection into an entity such as Eskom, that is reflected on the balance sheet as an increase in the equity held by the shareholder. Now, what NERSA has tried to do is to say that this equity injection is in fact revenue, and we therefore think that from an accounting perspective that is fundamentally incorrect, and we disagree with that, and hence we have taken them to court.
All right. What is the situation with the 2018-2019 regulatory clearing account? That's the 27 billion rand application to NERSA because of Eskom's overspend during that period. The decision was expected from NERSA at the end of March. What's the situation with that decision? Obviously, COVID-19, there is disruptions to many things. Is there a disruption to this as well?
There has been a number of delays in these decisions, and we await the outcome of that decision. And once that is made known, then we will take the matter under advisement, and we will obviously have to take whatever steps required to protect the interests of Eskom and the electricity industry.
I want to just touch on another issue, and that's the trade unions that are some of the unions are opposed to Eskom's use of PIC funds. Is it correct for Eskom to make costly financial mistakes and then expect to recover the money from the public?
I don't think that any entity should be able to make mistakes without consequences. However, the fact of the matter is that Eskom is burdened with 450 billion rands worth of debt. And that debt, unfortunately, is so large that it even imperils the sovereign, namely the Republic of South Africa itself. So this is a situation that we have to resolve. The debt isn't going to go away. And where we would like to applaud the efforts of COSATU is that they have sought to come up with a solution recognizing the very fundamental and structural importance of Eskom and the state of the Eskom balance sheet to the South African economy. It's not for us to comment on whether or not the use of workers' pension funds is an appropriate source of funds to assist Eskom. We leave that to the PIC and their fiduciary responsibility towards the pensioners whose funds they invest. But we welcome the fact that there is a creative discussion and a dialogue going on with unions and other stakeholders to try and resolve this debt issue.
You know, South Africans have really found it very difficult to believe Eskom, and they've come to distrust the company due to many allegations of corruption, and most of those haven't even been resolved. But the entity has been bankrupt, basically. Now, give us an update of some of the cases, including the recent allegation that's been leveled against the COO, Jan Oberholzer, that he's a shareholder in one of the companies that allegedly defrauded Eskom of 139 billion rand in inflated contracts.
Leanne, First of all, I think we must just put that number of 139 billion rand into context. That is the total value that has been spent at Kusile up to now. There is no single contractor that has received that amount of money. So that is I guess, a slight exaggeration of the amount that is at stake. But the principle of the matter is still obviously valid, and that is where there are any allegations of corruption against anybody, and that includes myself, these must be investigated and they must be properly ventilated. And to the extent that these allegations are found to be true, they then have to be followed through with appropriate disciplinary, civil or even criminal action.
Yeah.
Now, in the case of Mr. Oberholzer, we have launched an investigation using an independent senior counsel to conduct an investigation. This is ongoing. We've already received a preliminary report. We expect the report to be finalized within the next week or so. And once that is done, the board will then be in a decision to decide what steps, if any, should be taken against Mr. Oberholzer, depending on the outcome of this investigation.
All right. So with things as they stand now, how will the fund gap affect your financial risk as you'll be wrapping up your books for the financial year as well? What will your financials look like when you publish them after this entire period?
Well, we are in a closed period as far as the financial markets are concerned, but it's no secret that Eskom will still report a loss and that the balance sheet will still be under considerable strain. And that is why the court case against NERSA is such an important one to resolve, because if all of the assistance that government has promised us to the tune of 250 billion rand over a 10-year period is going to be classified as revenue, that clearly is not going to do anything to alleviate the debt burden and will in fact depress our revenue base even further, and that will therefore not resolve the problem.
Yeah, certainly. I imagine that this is not, many people thinking this is a good time for Eskom to try and clean up its house, but financially things are still not good at all. I want to touch very quickly before we come to the end of the interview, the situation with the Western Cape who want to procure their own power from IPPs. Where will this leave Eskom and also other municipalities wanting to procure electricity from other IPPs?
So municipalities today buy about 60% of Eskom's electricity. So they are a major source of revenue to us, and they're a very important customer base for us. We are obviously being very careful in how we approach the municipalities. We want to ensure that we remain their first choice supplier. But as the President announced in his State of the Nation address, municipalities will be allowed to buy electricity from their own sources. This is not necessarily purely to the detriment of Eskom, as we will still have to make available our transmission network in order for them to wheel the electricity from the source where it is.
Yeah, a difficult question I need to ask you, but do you ever see a time when Eskom can be a profitable entity again?
I think we require significant restructuring. The world of electricity is changing, the world of energy is changing, and in order to prepare for that, we have embarked on a divisionalization exercise which seeks to split Eskom up into the three different entities: generation, transmission, and also distribution. I also anticipate that we will see increasing private capital being invested in generation, and it is up to us to prepare ourselves for a situation like that as our aging fleet of power stations reach their retirement date. Now, this also creates a business opportunity for Eskom in that we are potentially able to repurpose some of these older power stations by converting them either to natural gas or to install renewables on land that we own around those power stations, and we are making progress on those programs.
Yeah. Just finally, some have referred to your job as possibly one of the most unenviable tasks and jobs in South Africa. Do you sometimes wish you never accepted this job, or what is your view? You've been in it for a few months now. How are you feeling?
To say that the job is energizing and exciting is probably an understatement. It is a very demanding job, but I've got exceptional colleagues who work with me, who support me. I've got a strong board, and I've also got a very involved minister who helps me with navigating the political landscape. So this is a doable job, but we need to rely on the assistance of every South African, first of all, to manage electricity more wisely and more prudently. And we would request South Africans to bear with us as we catch up with neglected maintenance over the next 18 months or so.
All right, Andre De Ruyter, the CEO of Eskom, talking to us via Skype. Thanks very, very much for joining us here on Morning Live.